Hello traders, and a big warm welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for those of you especially who are new to watching my videos. I'm always very grateful to gain followers and I really appreciate it, and I also obviously enjoy lots of feedback. So today is Sunday the 19th of September 2021. We're hurtling towards Christmas and I'm going to be having a look at the markets. First off, what I want to do is just highlight the high impact news that's coming up this week, and one of the things that I'm definitely going to be paying attention to will be the FOMC. I'm not going to obsess about it, but I do I do want to be aware of kind of what is the timeline for any kind of implementation in terms of kind of Fed tapering. The reason would be predominantly because of my expectation that the markets would have a larger correction or begin a larger correction at that point in time. Okay, so that's predominantly it, which also means potentially paying attention to Fed Chair Powell, but that's on Friday, that's the end of the week, so that doesn't really matter so much. Yeah, we've got obviously out of Canada, there'll be some potential impacts in terms of the federal election there as well. So I think most of it is going to focus, will be kind of orbiting around Wednesday's news. That'll be around 7:30 p.m. In fact, in the run-up, 6:30 p.m. potentially, those who get news slightly ahead of the time will get a sense of stuff. There'll be some increased volatility around the markets. If the Fed is expecting to make any major changes, they'll almost certainly broadcast what their intentions are ahead of time, so as to kind of help the market process it. All right, so having said that, let's go and have a look at the chart. So the first chart that I want to kind of talk about is the VIX. So I've set up these alerts to kind of just alert to, me to when we kind of cross particular kind of round numbers here. So we've got 15, 20, 25. And so this week, of course, we did manage to close above 20. Just the implication being that we should get better, I would say better quality trading opportunities once we sort of start to head up a little bit higher. But this area here around about this 21 mark has been a level of resistance for quite some time. And I'm not really super convinced with the close of last week's candle. I'd like to see it close higher. I'm just drawing your attention to this. This is usually an indication that hopefully that means the market will start to produce some better, sort of slightly longer lasting trends, or some kind of committed direction across even in the currency markets would be great. So there we go. Looking to see that finish a little high. I want to see if it can push its way up and actually close a lot high, ideally even starting to push up above that. And in fact, it makes sense that if we are going to see some sort of tapering and there's going to be some sort of correction in the markets, it makes more sense if we'd start to see the VIX start to climb a little bit more as well. So just having a look at that, that's a good sign for me as far as I'm concerned, to start to see, which implies there might be some more potential moves in the markets. Okay, so then moving on to the dollar index. Dollar index here showing some increased strength on the daily, also starting to show some higher low here on the weekly and a nice little bullish close to the upside. So from what I see here, it makes more sense that dollar is going to attempt to push its way up towards 94 this week. Again, that monthly also looking quite nice, and we've now got that. It's, you could argue it's range bound, but it's also slightly higher low, higher high, and therefore an uptrend. I'd like to see it push its way up towards 95 this week. So wouldn't that be great if there was some confluence and start to see some movement on the VIX, some increase in terms of bonds as well when we get to those, and also seeing a bit of a move on that US dollar. And so therefore this week I'm going to be positioning myself. Of course, what I'll be doing is cautious as we approach the lows of this range. But my expectation at this point in time is to see this really attempt to break out and start pushing euro dollar down to 1.16, so stronger US dollar leading towards, and obviously with respect to those ranges, knowing that, until you're out of the range, you're not out of it. But looking so far, looking to see if we get a continuation of that. So of course, what could happen is by the end of the week, the VIX doesn't break much higher, doesn't close much higher, or tries and fails, and the dollar tries and fails, and we end up back where we are a week from now, which is just boring and frustrating. But hopefully that's not going to be the case. So looking here again at sterling against US dollar, we've got a lower high here, higher low. So this is leading towards a breakout. If we do end up getting a much stronger dollar, we're going to see that break. That's going to lead to a breakout to the downside. Australian dollar to the US dollar looking quite nice. So actually what I like about this as well is that although we have broken that downtrend on the weekly, within that monthly, we're still potentially going to head a little low. We are still in an uptrend. Well, unless you want to count this as a lower high, lower low in terms of that swing low over here. That's on weekly, not so much on the monthly. But because we finished with a little bit of an indecision candle, I'm open to this heading a little bit lower. So I'll be looking for short so far on that. It's not necessarily the best one I've seen, but the price action is quite nice and clean. Kiwi dollar here attempting to finish bullish off that 0.69 level. Nice little bullish monthly candle. We broke above the high. But what this really tells me is there's no real clear direction. Okay, it's swinging wildly, and therefore I'd be quite cautious on that. I prefer if we are for example, going to get that stronger US dollar, that I trade the weakest of the, excuse me, the weakest of the currencies against it, the weakest of the currency pairs. Dollar yen, as usual, complete garbage. And there, look at that weekly. Okay, so that will reveal itself to some degree when we get a bit of a stronger US dollar, but otherwise stay away from that. Dollar Swissy, there we go. Look at that break, much higher. If there was a range here, it's not involved in that anymore. We've got a higher low there, so we're potentially leading towards a higher high there. That supports that idea of a stronger US dollar as well. And so this actually looks quite interesting to me if we do get any pullbacks in towards the top of this market structure over here, or perhaps down towards daily support resistance. Any of these levels this week, I would see that as potential swing trading opportunities, but more likely because swing trading has been really rough in terms of currencies this year, because very few trends have really maintained themselves other than some of the yen crosses and some of the dollar CAD early on in the year. But for the last few months, it's been, excuse me, a waste of time. I'd be looking for price for intraday shorter moves, if that is an option. Dollar CAD, you're breaking out of this range from last week, pushing a little bit higher, and expecting that to continue up towards 1.3. So dollar CAD might sit very much on my watch list. So dollar CAD, dollar Swissy, possibly euro dollar short, liking the looks of that. All right, so let's move on to some of the pairs, the crosses of interest. All right, so starting off with the crosses, looking at Euro Swissy, like the structure of this nice uptrend here, starting to push to that 1.093 daily support resistance level. And so I'll be looking for continuation and pullbacks, retest, obviously up towards here, closer towards, well, this is where I'll be a little bit more concerned about that 10986, which is close to the 1.1. This area of potential resistance, but nice little potential buy opportunities over there in that pair. Also on pound Swissy, I quite like this. If we can especially just, if we can just get through this clear level of resistance at 1.28, some consistent, some nice move, and then ideally there is some consistent price action behavior, looking for retest and continuations to the upside. Aussie Swissy, this one for me, again, also looking to see this break through that level of resistance, retest it and head higher. Even better if we can break through that 68.50 monthly support resistance level, but looking relatively nice and bullish. Then moving on to Aussie Kiwi, which has just continued all the way down to significant monthly support at 1.03. I'd like to see if we could break through this, retest it, and continue to the downside. And that's not necessarily a guarantee. In fact, if it's a bit overextended, this will be a really good place for it to start a weekly retracement back up to retest 1.05. So that is a possibility. That's why I'd prefer to see it kind of break these lows, come back, retest, reject that, and continue. Euro Yen. So the yen pairs are currently, the yen crosses are looking particularly bearish. This price action nice and bearish, a rejection of that daily level. I'd like to see a continuation down. I'm a little cautious as we approach lots of different market structures here, and therefore moves might be quite short, but continuation down towards 1.27 on the monthly certainly would be nice. Even on the weekly as well, down towards that would make sense to me. There will be some resistance, some kind of structure, market structure support around 128.26. 25, and so I'll be a bit cautious of that. And finishing off on Swissy yen, obviously a nice big move to the downside here. We can see the Swiss franc has been moving, but any pullbacks into this level around that 119.40, 45 area, possibly even as high as 50, I think it's a little bit too far, but into that area for resistance, and then looking for continuation moves to the downside would be fantastic. If it does break through, then any pullbacks to test these levels, these local levels, monthly levels of support and resistance, and continuation to the downside would also make a lot of sense. I think there is a possibility, though, we'll see a move to the upside first, and I want to see how that looks here on the monthly. We've got a weekly downtrend on the monthly. We've got an uptrend on the, a weekly downtrend here on the weekly chart, obviously, an uptrend on the monthly, and we've got that daily on that. So I need to see those start to decide which way it ultimately wants to go. Okay, so now moving on to precious metals, starting off with gold and silver. Let's have a look at those. Gold's in a downtrend here, breaking through daily levels of support. You can see this continued rejection of that level, which I was really hoping we'd break through this time. We're not past that yet. So gold is definitely not as strong at this point in time as some people might think it is. It is not behaving as though it's a safe haven for anyone. So that also hints at general market stability in terms of equities. In fact, this big move up here was still a bit of a hanging man there, and therefore the market seems to be disregarding that and still testing the lows. So overall, I do find gold relatively weak, but it's also acting within a range. So largely, unless I see a continuation to the downside, and there might very well be some shorting opportunities down to 1700 and 1680, I'm going to stay away from it at this point in time, because it could just as easily find a floor here and then go back up to the top of the range. Very annoying, very painful, but most of the metals, palladium, platinum, all of those are looking quite weak. And silver is as well. Silver is starting to head down towards those lows, and therefore I think it's very feasible that gold might also attempt to go lower. Again, I'm just going to highlight that we're coming down to a monthly level of support here on silver. I should actually add that level in. And so therefore bounce off those levels could also happen. So basically I'm leaning bearish, but well within that range. I'm going to be that little bit more cautious. Okay, now moving on to crude oils. Crude oils are still continuing to push up towards 75. They're still trying to stay, there was a nice little monthly correction that happened there. This is now looking at US crude West Texas, and then looking to see that push up towards $75. Coming into this area, there will no doubt be some resistance as well as a significant price level there as well. But overall, it is still more bullish than bearish. Brent crude, definitely more bullish than bearish. Starting to, did we create some new highs here? Yep, we did. So we've created a few new highs here. Any pullbacks, testing support might provide me with some buying opportunities, but I'm also, again, just going to be a little bit more wary of prices that goes here. So again, leaning bullish, prices had a nice correction. Therefore, it should now, from experience, have a lot more energy ready to continue to the upside. I'll be looking for that and just wary of these levels of potential resistance as we approach them. But as I said, at least here, this is leaning bullish, whereas gold and silver are leaning bearish. Moving on to the global indices, starting off here with the Dow. So again, we've had some, look at that, just failure to get to that level. Just a lot of exhaustion in candles. They're just unable to get past that 35,325 level, if you want to round it up, but 35,400, but really struggling to get through that. Now starting to breach these lows again, and we're still due a nice healthy correction. We really do need to have that. It's now looking more and more likely that this is a possibility. Excuse me. So now, I'm just going to be prepared for the market to test these levels. And one of the things that often happens, the market connects these levels and there's buy orders sitting and there's often quite a bit of a bounce. But I want to see how the market reacts this time. Does it kind of have quite strong bounces? Because that can very well happen. You could end up with a very strong bullish candle that completely just pushes all the way back up to those highs. But you can see there's definitely a struggle at this point, and the market is also flattening out. This is, this kind of stuff is not looking ideal. That angle of things changing a bit, and this now looking very much almost like a very much more likely outcome that will get a bit of a deeper correction. And so that is of interest to me. There might be some higher risk shorting opportunities as we break these lows. The market moves quite fast for intraday traders. When I say higher risk, because the market moves so fast and because the market bounces off these levels, most people decide, okay, I'm going to sell and I'm going to hold that position, and the market recovers fully and they're caught on the wrong side of it. So it's very much high risk to short when we are still, ladies and gentlemen, still very much in a bull market. There's no doubt to me that there is some bearish divergence here and we could do with a bit of a correction there, but I am cautious because the market can recover really quickly. So again here, looking at the S&P, nice confirmed head lower there. We've got that weekly pulling back into the moving averages here. This looks nice and healthy. So there's nothing really stopping the weekly chart here from producing a nice bullish recovery. But also that monthly now starting to look a little bit more like that. So for me, I think it would be significant if we break the low of August's candle, which if we put that in at 4503. So if we break below 45, I think that's a fair assessment to say that we could potentially now be starting a monthly correction down towards 4,000. Okay, so just again cautious with that. As I said, the markets can, looking now, for example, the Nasdaq can come back into prior market structures, find some support, and then recover from that, and that would be a beautiful weekly kind of nice bullish weekly candle, and therefore, the weekly is ready to keep going. At some point, of course, you can see here we get a series of green candles, we get a red candle, and then a series of green candles and a red candle. At some point, we'll need to get 2 or 3 red candles to see a proper correction down towards 14,000. My question is that going to happen now? We'll see. So this week, again, cautious as we approach previous market structures or major support resistance levels because of bounces. If we start to fall through those, I do think it'll be very attractive in terms of intraday trading, shorting opportunities, and again, higher risk, shorter term shorting opportunities, but higher risk. Okay. We can never remove the risk. The risk is always there, but the probabilities now lean a little bit more towards the downside. This is a mess. So this is the Russell 2000. Complete mess. You can see it's just trying to tread water where it is. Strong level of support there, 2,100. Curious to see if that's going to get tested again this week. Moving on to the FTSE 100. Strong resistance, bearish divergence. Look at that. Bearish divergence from both RSI and MACD, and a break lower and a confirmed downtrend on the daily. That weekly now looking more and more like it wants to come back down and test 6.8. And then monthly potentially starting to do that move. So the question is really going to be, is the weekly able to recover? Do we get a nice strong bullish weekly candle this coming week, or do we start to head a little bit lower? Or even, I guess, that annoyingly, a combination of both, where we drop lower and then finish with a recovery. We do both. Okay, it's ridiculous to be able to say, oh, well, it could be anything. It's not really. It's looking more bearish now than bullish. The DAX as well, slowly look at a series now of the last 5 weeks being red candles. That surely is not, that's not something we've had for a while. So that monthly also starting to look more and more bearish. Euro stocks, they're again, same thing again, lower highs, low lows, downtrend there, bearish candles coming into this weekend. Like I said, the weekly, this is to me is a lot more about the weekly. Is the weekly letting off a lot of steam? Is it able to recover? It's the daily downtrend is not really that significant because we can see that this is either a weekly correction or it's going to be the beginning of a monthly correction. Okay, is it ridiculous? Well, not really. We've had a very long time. We've had more than a year without a monthly correction. It would be good for us to have it. And how dire could it be? Well, it would be down towards these moving averages, potentially down towards the 10 and 20 into that area, down to previous market structures. If a year from now we look back and the overall conditions are still roughly the same as they have been for the last few months, I would then lean towards it being a leaner or a lighter correction rather than a much more serious correction. Okay, it doesn't mean that everything out there is perfect, not at all. I'm just leaning towards the fact that if the tapering, and again, it makes sense, we've got that tapering coming up this week. If the tapering is going to be quite heavy, or if there are major concerns about inflation, Kathy Wood from ARC also talking about deflation. She's worried about deflationary cycles. I'm just going to kind of see how the price is reacting to that. So based on what I'm seeing here, if there is any kind of concerns, there doesn't seem there's a run towards, there's no dollar-yen behavior yet. There's a bit of dollar potential, US dollar strengthening. That's a possibility. But there's no gold safe haven behavior yet. Let's have a look at the bonds when we see them Treasuries. This is a good, strong move, man. Look how nice and strong this is on the Nikkei, back into those old highs. So again, not really a sign of weakness there. Finishing off with the S&P out of Australia, the S&P ASX. This very much would be great to see this just come back down to test that 7,200 level. So it might just be a lighter correction, but I am prepared for both. Now, moving on to the individual equities of interest here. Okay, starting off with Royal Mail. Backing right down into that 500, into those levels. It's a good area for it to come back and produce a nice recovery there. So that's a really nice, healthy monthly correction. I want to see if it's able to recover from that. American Express, Amex. This could go a little bit further. This could certainly come down towards 135, 140, but it's really, again, similar to some of the indices like the Russell 2000. It's trying to stay where it is. It's trying to tread water. It deserves to have a bigger correction to kind of let off some of that steam. And so I'm going to be very cautious of this because I think there could be some pressure at the market coming down to these lows. So just a little bit more cautious of that. ARC Innovation I was talking about here is kind of treading water here. A lot of indecision candles, which is either a result, and you can see leaning slightly bullish, higher lows there, but struggling to go a little bit higher. Overall, I do think that this is inherently healthy, but that doesn't mean that if the rest of the markets head lower, this one won't. So just keeping an eye on that. Berkshire Hathaway flirting with this level of support here, and almost certainly again could definitely afford to have a correction down to 263 or 250, even potentially down to 232. Let off some of that steam. I think this week I'm just going to see if we can head down towards this level of support and test that again. BP. Okay, so BP actually produced, we had a nice correction. We've produced some inside bullish candles. This is looking, interestingly enough, more bullish than bearish, and that makes sense. We're having looked at West Texas, having looked at, having looked at both US and UK crude oils. We've seen them actually looking relatively healthy, so I'm not too concerned about those. So that was West Texas and Brent. So interesting to see if we can break higher off the market. Is going to come back down towards these lows, but not looking that dire. Coca-Cola, beautiful swing high there on the monthly. Now primed to come back and test these old highs here. So coming back towards, say, 53, around that level to test that for support. And let's see if that can hold, if it's going to do that. ExxonMobil will be similar, by the way, to BP. Nice little bullish inside candle. Can this manage to push higher? So my expectation is that it'll stay the same or potentially push a little bit higher, especially if crude oils can push a little bit higher. It'll be okay in that respect. General Motors has had a really good correction. I'm very happy with this. I mean, there's nothing stopping it from coming a little bit further, but it's got a nice little bullish inside candle so far. And of course, this could all change because we've got 11 days, give or take 10, 11 days to the end of the month. I want to see what that possibility is for that market to potentially head down and test that. So is it going to find some resistance at 53 and unable to move on from there? JP Morgan Chase also having done well, finding some strong resistance around that 160 area. Nothing stopping this again from coming back down and testing 150 and 145. My dog is never satisfied when until we go to the door and actually open the door to see if someone's going to be here. Okay, Morgan Stanley. This has been a star performer, now looking at the very least like a correction down to 100, potentially down to previous highs here at 93.50. Looks really nice and healthy here. Again, similar to some of the indices, a correction here would be very welcome, down towards 80, down towards 60 on a bigger scale, but on a shorter scale down towards kind of 85. And actually right now I'm just looking at treating it as though it's going to have a bit of a excuse me, a correction down to 100, possibly down to 93, 94 on the weekly. So have a look at that. But you can see here, just unable to get beyond that. So a lot of charts showing a bit of this complete inability to get past that. They haven't really shown that in a while. There's a little bit here, but that's a strong sign of just not enough buyers above that level to carry it over the line. Let's have a look at Apple. Obviously, Apple, if you were around last week, you would have seen the annual kind of update from their side, which was okay. I think it was very much meh. This is okay. And so, look, I'm not going to read too much into that. If overall the markets have topped out a bit, it's going to impact everyone regardless of how well they're doing. And here we go. There's a potential here for this to come back down to 140, potentially 138 into these previous market structures. Does look as though it's setting up for a bit of a monthly correction. That's interesting to me. I want to see if we break these lows on the daily. So again, just going to be cautious, watch that a bit from the side. Nvidia, which has also been a star performer, certainly makes sense to me to see this come back down to 207, 208 this week. That would be great to see a pullback into that if that's going to be the case. And here we go, struggling PayPal, although I do like the look of it. It's no doubt has produced now a lower high. Breaking these lows, good opportunity to see it head down towards 233. You can see some very strong resistance there around about that 291 mark, 292 mark, and 300 being a big problem for it. So let's see if we can have a bit of a deeper correction down towards 233 if that's going to be the case. Let's have a look at Tesla. Tesla's doing well. Look at that. Really, I mean, it's not making huge leaps forward, but overall it is creeping to the upside and looks really nice and healthy on the weekly. Daily looks pretty good. I want to see if we can continue higher. And it's not to say you wouldn't get a knock if you had a larger correction, but this is overall just not terrible. It's good. I like the look of that. So it's looking pretty strong. Let's look at the spider. Spider coming back down to these moving averages, produced a bullish candle, failed to break the high, produced another bullish candle, now has broken the high. This is certainly going to attempt to climb. Can it get past that 140 level? Let's see if it can do that. That's up here. I think it's fair to say that's going to attempt to climb a little bit higher, finishing off with Vanguard, which is also a star performer, but I'm not sure if you can see this, but this angle of performance, the angle of trajectory has slowed. It's starting to angle down a bit, and this is going to be similar to the others. I want to see if we can finish with a bullish candle over the next week, or whether this is the beginning. So in other words, if on a lot of the charts we have been considering the idea that we finish with a bullish candle, instead we finish with a heavily bearish candle that closes right near the lows, that leans towards supporting the idea of there being a larger correction on the cards, okay, a monthly correction. Let's move away and go to have a look at Treasuries. Treasuries now, no one's buying Treasuries so far, certainly not looking at the 10-year T-note. That's actually starting to test those lows. It's in a downtrend on the daily. It's looking more bearish than bullish. Again, that weekly, just a mess. That's just, again, a bit of a mess and a potential swing high here on that monthly. Let's look at the euro, the bubble. Heading lower within its range, looks like it's heading down towards the bottom of the range. Interesting to me. Let's look at the euro Bund. Bund also heading a lot lower. So what can we take away from this? Well, for me, I can take away, because I'm not giving you financial advice, I'm just giving you my opinion. No one's buying bonds. So we're not seeing a rush to gold, in my opinion, where metals are looking weak. We're not seeing dollar yen do anything. We're seeing a bit of a movement on the dollar. We're not seeing a move towards bonds. We're seeing a bit of a move in the VIX. That doesn't mean it can't start happening. So maybe by the end of the week, we see a move, but I'm not seeing it now. So I'm seeing some potential stuff at the end of the table. I mean, like things that are now on the table as a possibility. But now to me, it looks as though there's no panic at this time. It's potentially, and of course, if you know anything about the stages of the market moves, the panic often comes in at a later stage. But at this point in time, there doesn't appear to be much panic. Let's see what happens after FOMC on the run up to that. Right now, I'm going to treat it as a probable weekly correction with a potential for weekly recovery and therefore a continuation, and therefore we go back into kind of a continuation to the upside with a possible but minor or less likely beginning of a larger monthly correction. And we'll know because if next week we've closed in the lows and then we can see the VIX has climbed a bit higher and treasuries have started to get a bit more attention and maybe metals are recovered a bit, then we're starting to see a bit of safe haven behavior. Not seeing that just yet. Okay, finishing off on cryptos, because this is one of the things I want to see about cryptos. We will know for sure if cryptos have become a major part of our future, if cryptos become a safe haven option for the markets. That's really going to be a big tell. So if we start to see these start to climb while the rest of the markets are starting to fall, that would support that idea conceptually anyway. So looking to see how this goes. I want to see Bitcoin this week break through 50 and closed on the other side of that. It's looking good on the weekly. It's a beautiful, nice little inside bullish candle. If we break the high of that and continue up, we might well finish above the highs of that, and that's a good sign. Let's have a look at Ethereum. Ethereum here is definitely going to battle with that 4,000 level, and it's not really offering many clues here. Again, I would expect that to continue to the upside. If, on the other hand, we break to the downside, then we might just be seeing another temporary stall. It's very possible cryptos could take a hit just like anything else. If gold falls, cryptos could fall. What I'm curious about is, will we see a difference where we'll start to see cryptos climb in areas maybe where there's a bit of a move? It's just, I don't know what's going to happen just yet. I'm curious to see. I'm just entertaining the idea. Let's have a look at a few of the others. NEO, although this has begun a nice little, it's had a beautiful correction. It's in a really good place to climb higher. It's struggling. There's no buyers above that. So I'm not seeing a lot of love for cryptos at the moment. And I don't think that's necessarily a lack of faith in them. I just think it looks as though people are kind of maybe going to take a rest from buying for a bit. This is certainly showing some signs into Cardano, probably going to top out a little bit. Ripple, look at that. It's a bit of a bearish setup here. And Dogecoin, let's have a look at that. These are what we call the social media, the meme cryptos. That also not really going anywhere. So interesting, and I think it's worth mentioning that's almost a bit of a bearish setup, I might add. There's a bit of bullishness pushing in there. Finishing off just with those cryptos. Okay, so cryptos at this point are not looking bulletproof. Okay, they might be just as much up for a bit of a correction as anything else. This week, and I always hate to say it, I feel like I say I'm cautious a lot, but certainly 2021 I've been more cautious because the markets have stumbled a lot more. I'm liking the look of some of those currencies for intraday stuff. I'm liking the look of some of the indexes and possibly oil, and not as much love for gold at this point, and just cautious with those indices, and we'll see what happens with the treasuries. So on that note, ladies and gents, I do hope you've enjoyed this. Please don't be shy. I really appreciate it if you can give me a thumbs up and do the subscribe thing, the usual favor if you can to get my content out there. I'm always grateful for that. And again, yes, hopefully if you enjoy this, please give me positive feedback. I don't know, constructive feedback. I don't care if you enjoy it. Thank you very much, and listen, have a great week and be sensible out there, all right?